I will start with Principal Rowe to my left. So Mr. John Roll is entering his 20th year in the field of education. 10 of those years have been with DCPS. And with experience at the middle and elementary levels in both public and public charter school sectors, Mr. Roll has taught and led in Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. In his last year in the classroom, he was named the 2011 D.C. Teacher of the Year by OSCE. In 2015, Mr. Roll joined DCPS as the Dean of Students at Stanton, where he led culture for grades K through 2, and he supported strategic interventions for scholars. He transitioned to serve as Stanton's ELA instructional coach, oversaw the department's double-digit PARCC proficiency gains and double-digit decreases in PARCC Level 1 scores. Following Stanton, Mr. Roll became a founding assistant principal at Ida B. Wells. He also served as the RISE resident principal at Smothers Elementary, and he is currently the proud principal of Garfield Elementary, which is such an amazing school. All right, I am going to move on then to Dr. Chinita Pilgrim, who is a proud DC native and a proud product of DCPS. She has over 24 years of experience in education, teacher, instructional coach, master educator, AP, currently her 6th year as principal of Burrville Elementary School. Dr. Pilgrim aims to build and bridge gaps in education by empowering families with tools necessary to strengthen connections between home and school. She also recognizes the commitment to lifelong learner means proactively developing and discovering ways to react to the needs of our students. And that means knowing when to tap into additional resources as needed to reach various needs of stakeholders and knowing when to pass the baton. Dr. Pilgrim is committed to expanding opportunities for educators to advocate for their needs and holding them accountable to the growing demands in education. And I want to highlight that again, growing demands in education. She believes now more than ever is the time to partner with educators to seize opportunities, develop young minds, and shape our future, especially with our students furthest from opportunity. The time is now. Dr. Pilgrim received her bachelor's from GW, her master's from Regent, and her doctorate also from GW. And then finally, we will turn to Principal LeVar Jenkins, who is Gracie's kid's principal.
I'm totally biased. Burroughs is such an amazing school.
Yeah, and they love it there. LeVar Jenkins is a seasoned educator with a diverse background in school administration and special education. He began his teaching career in 2001 as a middle school English teacher in PG County, and later expanded his experience by teaching in Fairfax County. In 2016, he took on the role of principal at John Burroughs Elementary School, following his tenure as the special education coordinator at Baycroft and West Education Campus, now known as John Lewis. His leadership journey also includes serving as AP at H.D. Cook and Plummer. Since assuming the principalship at John Burroughs, Principal Jenkins has overseen remarkable increase in ELA proficiency on PARCC, achieving a substantial 26% growth between 2019 and 2020. He firmly believes in the importance of teacher retention and has made it a priority to create supportive environments that value and recognize contributions of educators. His efforts are driven by a passion for building a community of curious and confident students, preparing them to succeed academically and beyond. So I'm going to invite another. It's snowing. Sorry. Apologies.
The kids would do the same thing.
That'll be great. I want to invite another round of applause for our. And I think I'll start with you, Principal Jenkins. First question for the panel is just introduce yourself and share a little bit about your school community, what you think makes your school special.
Hello again, everyone. LeVar Jenkins, proud principal of Burroughs Elementary School. I think one of the things that makes my school unique is the community feeling to the school. When I first assumed the principalship at Burroughs, there was so much experience in the building. I have teachers that have been there since 1997. So the experience is just really phenomenal. And one of the things that I try to rely on is to rely on their expertise, to push the school to make us greater. So for me, it was just a teacher experience in the building. It was phenomenal.
Oh, good morning, everyone. I am Dr. Pilgrim, the very proud principal of Burville Elementary School, as she already said, the Bill on the Hill. We coined that, so that's. Yes, it's on the mural at our school. I think that what makes our school unique is family engagement. I would say that's something that we have really transformed since I started in 2016 as the AP there. I noticed that as an AP, that was a gap for us. And so because I was an AP at the time, there were certain things that, as you just kind of notice and not really say too much. You kind of do what, you're told. And so when I was able to become principal, that's one of the first things that I tackled. And so we do have monthly chat and choose where we see our parents as partners. And I think that has already helped support, like, break down barriers. And so we want to have that, like, community effort and feel so that parents can see the school as a place of comfort and joy, and that excellence lives here at Burville, which is also an mural at our school. We want to let folks know that we have the best interest for their students. And I think it starts with that trust that we were talking about earlier. And so a lot of times what I've noticed as an AP was that it was very combative, our conversations with the teachers and parents. And so one thing that we were really intentional about was making sure that we transformed those conversations. And that came through our chat and choose, through surveys, through focus talks, just to make sure that we're doing what's right for our kids and for our families. And teachers joined in with that as well, because they noticed that once we started having those conversations, the walls, they came down, and our teachers were able to have stronger conversations and stronger, build that trust with them, from families to home to school.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. John Roll, principal at Garfield. I thought of two things. I would say resiliency and I think optimism. So my school community just moved into a brand new modernized building, which we are super proud of, which has been just a great catalyst for, like, resuming optimism, as I would say is the second word. So we are in the heart of Ward 8. I mean, I think everybody in the room knows the specific challenges that come with leading and educating in a school that has a lot of community-based concern. And with all the change, I think the thing that I've noticed about the staff, the community, and the scholars is that there is this resiliency and this optimism about the future. So it's my second year as principal, so a lot of year one was just getting us into this building, really trying to work on this idea of trust and really defining what we want to see for the future. So that second word, optimism, is huge for us this year, because we're really in the stage of building those bonds, building those connections, reestablishing what family looks like, getting to know the community with our new staff members, but really trying to chart out the educational experience that we want for our scholars moving forward. And that's far beyond our test scores. Really just thinking about, what do we see the school experience for our babies each day, and what does that look like? So I'm excited about that part of my community.
Thank you. What I heard from all three of you is that there's a lot of, like, pride in your communities and really leaning into the assets of the people that are in the building. So our next question then is, how would you describe your leadership style, and would you describe it as team-centered leadership? We'll throw that out to you. I can volunteer you, but we all know how helpful it is.
Sure, I'm sorry. I think I would describe my leadership style as human-centered. I think one of the things that I've learned over the years is that I've worked the most for people that I felt like cared about me. So coming in, it was important to make sure that I got to know everyone as individuals. I'm starting to learn about their families, about the things that they like, they dislike, how they like to receive feedback, what do things, do that are available to them that make them feel comfortable. So I feel like it is a leadership style that is rooted in growing trust. I think it's also a leadership style that's open. One of the things that, I've experienced over the years is coming into a school environment where there's been a change in leadership or a change of some sort. And there's this bulldoze tactic of, like, we're just going to come in and ransack everything that you've done. And what was important for me was to validate the experiences and the time that people in my community have spent. So I'm new, large in part, right? So what worked, What didn't work? Of course, I'm gonna look with my leadership lens and make changes and pivots as they need. But it's important to validate, understand, and be a part of the experiences of the people that have been there, that have put in the work, that know the community, that know the needs of the scholars, and can help drive this work forward over the long haul. So I would say definitely I feel like it's human-centered, and really just open, and really trying to get the perspectives, the ideas, and the experiences of the folks that have led and been in the community for years.
And I would just add to that, that I do believe that I'm human-centered as well. I think that we have no choice but to be in these roles as principals because we have to make sure everyone is okay. And so with that, I would say, that also means that feeling comfortable in the seat of vulnerability. So sometimes for me, that is sharing that I don't know the answer either. And so even as principals, we are often charged with having the answers, having the solution, being able to just, what's the solution? What's the strategy? What we're gonna do? Sometimes, and I gotta say this, like COVID put everybody on pause because we all just did not know the answers to things that, you know, as school leaders, we're often charged to do that. So putting in that seat of vulnerability and then exposing that level of vulnerability with my staff and with my parents, I definitely know that that built trust and also built that, that human-centeredness. Also that I think that human-centeredness is also the reason why I'm partnering with Empower Ed, because I know that that's not a lane that I'm really comfortable in as far as, you know, I don't want to say feelings, but also like that self-care. That's something I'm learning too as a school leader. So because I don't have the answers all figured out for myself, I expose that to my staff. So like, I'm telling them like, just because I may be here and I'm not feeling well, doesn't mean you need to be here and not feel well. Like you're going to be in front of the kids, take off. It's okay. I sent a teacher home yesterday. I was like, she's in there with the mask on, the eyes are looking droopy. Please go to urgent care. It's okay. I see your dedication, you know, like recognizing that it's okay not to be here because it's important to take care of yourself. And again, it's about making sure that our teachers, our staff are their best selves so they can show up for our students every day. Otherwise, we're going to get what we get and we can't be upset. So we have to be very much adult-centered, human-centered, student-centered as well, because that's who we are here for. So I want to keep that in mind too, as we're thinking about humans, students are humans too. And we got to make sure that we keep them in that whole focus as well. Sometimes we get so adult-driven that we don't think about the kids, and that's who we're there for. So we have to make sure that they are included in that whole trust situation.
Yeah, and to piggyback off that, the human-centeredness is an important aspect of this, but I also think identity is also equally important. We as leaders have to tap into our employees, teachers, staff. We have to tap into who they are as a person and how their identity shapes them as a person. So me as a Black man from New Orleans, grew up Catholic, I'm going to show up to work differently than a single Black mom who comes to work. So for me, a lot of the work is getting to know staff and having a team around you that can sort of help you with that work. As a leader, we can't get to everything at every single moment, but we have to know our staff identities and how they show up to work and how we can address that. Your identity helps to shape who you are, right? So like, if an individual is showing up to work in a specific way, we know the reason why. Something may have happened to them previously, and we're trying to get in touch with that. So I think as we talk about relational trust, it's equally important to tap into identities as well.
Thank you for those responses, and I do want to highlight it. So like that identity piece is really, it shapes so much of your relations and your like beginning level of trust, I think, as well. And so it definitely like mediates our experiences in school. And I want to elevate also, so I'm very leading into but elevating people's expertise and experience in the building, and also just being vulnerable, like showing, I think one of the common misconceptions about leadership is that you need to have everything together. And that's a pressure that teachers feel, it's a pressure that many students feel. And I think modeling that it's okay to not have all this is vital. Thank you. So when we're thinking about relational trust, I think for many people, it's either something that you see modeled, or it's something that you've just sort of like come to a breaking point, I have to try something new. So is there a lesson you could tell us about relational trust that has led you to your leadership style? I'll start with Dr. Pilgrim.
Okay, I'll
Is there-
start. Yeah, okay. I think COVID is what kind of shaped my leadership style. So I became principal in October of 2019. So it was non-traditional, the July, and had the pomp and circumstance. It was like, hey, I need you to step up. And it was like, okay, and that's what it was. And shortly after that, we were on the news with the case of a student who had meningitis. So that was the start of my leadership. It was like, we're on the Fox 5, parents are outside, and it's like, go out there and say everything is okay. And I think that, you know, I did. And it's like, I'm super calm with all of this. And I'm just like, I can't afford not to be, you know what I mean? I was just like, I'm gonna be calm and collected because we're already dealing with a lot of just the change and then also being on the news. And then the parent called me and like, yeah, that's my child. I was like, yeah, you gotta step down with the news. It was all of those things, but I think it's being relational. Like I wear that as a badge of honor that I'm a DC native. Like my families know that, my people know that. They know that I'm a graduate of DC public schools and I wear that as a badge of honor. Like they know, I'm like, what high school you went to? That's always a DC talk. What high school you went to? Oh, I went to Tech. I always say Tech. Well, that's where I went. So that's a conversation. And I think that builds relatability to my families and also with my staff. They know I'm a single mom. I got 3 kids. My oldest is 25 and lives in New York. I have that out there. Everybody knows that the teacher who taught her is back there in the back. I make sure I take this with me. But yeah, just exposing that part of your life. Like we're human too. And I think sometimes we have the title as principal and, it comes with this, let's have the blazer and the suit and the tie and the purse and the bag and the heels. And this is only for you guys because y'all didn't see me off days. Y'all sleep when I'm But I think that with that expectation, it's also about being relatable and being your authentic self. And I'm okay to be that way in front of my families, in front of my staff. And I think that builds the trust. So when I'm having conversations with them, it doesn't take nothing for me to say, we're having an emergency staff meeting tomorrow morning, and we're all there talking about whatever the issue is. It doesn't take anything for me to do that, and they understand that role that I have, and I have that expectation of them, and they expect that from me. And so I think that over time, my consistency with that has built our trust. And again, we're human, we make mistakes, the ball gets dropped, I may forget to say something, it happens. I think owning that as well is a part of the relational experiences that we've had. Like, when you drop the ball, I forgot to send that email. Sorry. Oh, it's okay, no problem. Because when you build that pathway, that runway up until then, it's okay when you drop the ball. It's allowed, right? Because as principals, sometimes we get this, this expectation, we can't make mistakes. And especially if the system and the culture is very much compliance driven, it doesn't give you the opportunity to make mistakes. And my folks know that very well. Just look at the email with the red exclamation point. Nobody wants that. But it's really about, making sure that you are putting yourself, whatever you feel comfortable with sharing as leaders out there and sharing who you are. And I think that gets reciprocated. So that's been my experience. It's just how I started in leadership.
And I think owning those mistakes, and explaining, owning the mistake and explaining the why behind the decision of how you came to that mistake is also equally important. In my first year at Burroughs, prior to me getting there were 4 principals in the span of a year. So there was a lot of turnover within the school. And going in, I was constantly told, Principal Jenkins, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to focus on this, focus on that. I was focused on so many things that I did drop the ball a lot. I made a lot of mistakes. But for me, I didn't necessarily explain how I got to a decision in addition to owning the mistake. So for me, I had to do a lot of backtracking in terms of building the relational trust. And so now if I make a mistake, I just say it, hey, I messed up. This is why I made the decision. This is what we need to do moving forward. Or if you have an idea, let's talk about it so we can problem solve. So I think owning the mistake is equally important, but also explaining why you made that decision for that mistake helps to build that relational trust as well.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of what was said. I think one thing I would throw in is just how you show up. I think for me, when I was a teacher and or a coach, the times that I saw leaders actually showing up allowed me to build trust. So like one thing that all my mentors and as a principal I do is like, I'm at arrival, I'm at dismissal. Like it doesn't matter what happens, like you're gonna see my face there. Like if we're short on lunch duty, like I'm at lunch duty, I'm out at recess, or like sometimes if we have coverage issues, like I'm not unwilling to cover a class. And I think part of what we do as educators in DC is really hard work. And I think a lot of times our teachers and staff feel like it's us versus them versus us working collaboratively, which builds that trust. And I think just the fact that you are showing up, right? Like I'm picking up trays at breakfast the same way, like one of my aides is picking up trays at breakfast, and like having that level of, at minimum, this person is showing up to do the work that I'm doing, I think is huge. I also thought about just two conversations I had yesterday in terms of showing up. I had a really rough conversation with my math instruction coach on Tuesday, and I reflected on the conversation. It was like, I went real hard on her. After I left that conversation, I was like, all right, like, what are the next steps? So like, she happened to be out on Wednesday, but when she came in on Thursday, I was like, let's have a chat, right? Like, it was 8:50, like, I got cussed out right after this meeting. I had another issue, like, before this, like, I was just not in a space to, like, truly receive what you were bringing to me. So, like, we definitely need to revisit what we were talking about, but it's okay for me to say, you know what, like, I didn't show up the way I needed to show up in that conversation. And I think I want my staff to have that same level of vulnerability. There are going to be times like, because we all know when 95% of the time when you're coming to the principal, it's usually not good news. So like we're dealing with people with frustration and urgency all the time. So part of our job is to make them, even if it's not true, I must say, feel like we have that same level of urgency, or we can help them navigate what that urgency is. And the other conversation I had was about showing up, like always going to dismissal. I had a teacher who was fairly quiet, new to the community, and like I'll literally just walk around and ask how everyone's day was. We started talking about Thanksgiving, and I was like, you know, this is a time where we can potentially connect. So I shared with her, a little less than 2 years ago, I lost my mom. So part of my like weird funk, I feel like this week is like Thanksgiving is approaching. And she shared with me that like in the last 5 years, she lost her mom, her dad, and her brother. So we were able to really just start to bond and connect over something that had nothing to do with school, but like just how we were feeling in this moment and what Thanksgiving and the anxiety around it looked like for us. So I think sometimes it's just being present and just asking something as small as like, what are you doing for Thanksgiving? Or like, how are you feeling today? Is really important as we think about like human-centered leadership.
Well, I had a story yesterday. It was so interesting. I happened to be walking to the playground, and the kindergarten teacher and the aide, they were trying to escort students back in from recess. So if you can imagine 50 kindergarten students trying to come back into the building. And there was one student who just did not want to come back into the building. So as I'm walking to the playground, the aide was actually struggling, trying to get the student to come back into the building. And I just said, hey, I have it, you know, you go in with the kids, it's fine. And the aide was so appreciative of that. I didn't necessarily see it as something major, but he found me after school to say, thank you so much. I need to buy you lunch. I'm like, no, it's just part of the job, you know what I mean? So I'm saying all that to say how we show up really does impact the relational trust as well.
I think for school leaders, and I'm going to do better projecting. Thank you. For school leaders, I think there's definitely that tension as well, where you're in sort of a tough spot. You need to focus on getting results, but you also need to focus on giving grace to yourself and your people. How do you walk that balance? Difficult question. You can give a minute of think time, and then gonna head to.
No, I'll start. Because I'm a woman, and like he'll be like, I'm gonna just go and cry, and we just go, you know, we start together. Because I could be very much like, it was due yesterday. I don't know why it's, you know, you don't have it right now. But on the other hand, I am that person. But what I do is I have an accountability partner. I do believe in having people I will call a bar. Okay, I will call a couple of people in my cluster and ask them, hey, am I tripping? You know what I mean? As my check my, my level of accountability. Am I going too hard in the paint right here? You know what I'm saying? And it's good to get somebody that's in your cluster because they know the same initiatives. They know what we're up against. They know what our specific unique needs are. So LeVar could tell you, like, I have called him, I have texted him, I'm like, give me a call when you get a chance. Sometimes it's a call and then it's like, I just called you, I need you to call me now, it'll be that type of thing, like, am I tripping? And trusting him to say, nah, Pilgrim, you ain't tripping, go ahead and handle that. Or, nah, let him go ahead on. Because again, I was doing this by myself. I didn't have an AP. This is the first year I had an AP. So a lot of this was just on me as the sole leader of the building. So it was like, what move do I make? Is this right? You know what I mean? So I have an AP this year. That's building self-care for the principal. Thank you. Shout out to that. But then also like having people that you really do trust, because you can't do principalship for your own. I don't care what anybody says. Yes, it is an isolating job, but it's not meant to be isolating. So I do believe in tapping in, and only because Roll is not in my cluster. He once was, I did check in, but because LeVar is in my cluster, it's not, so much of a phone call. And that's how I check myself, because sometimes we can't be so focused on a deadline, so focused on compliance, so focused on not getting an email with a red exclamation point that we lose sight of, the humanness, the sight of, the bigger picture. Like folks are dealing with a lot of things as we all are. And it's like, what are you willing to like really make it a big deal about? Are you really going to be like, you know what, let me help you with this conversation, or let me help, and he will role play. So like when I say he will do all the boxes for you, let's role play this conversation real quick. How is it gonna go this way? Like, it's important to have an accountability partner as a school leader. You can't talk to anybody in your school because that's bias, and that is show favoritism, and they not even supposed to know half this stuff. So I mean, they found out it's not because you said anything, but you have to build that like circle of trust, like have to expand beyond just you. Because I can't stress it enough. You cannot do principalship. You cannot do school leadership by yourself. You just can't. If you do, we see what happens. It'll be short lived. But I'm trying to, have some longevity in this. Shout out to Greg.
So I was thinking about accountability and support from like a perspective of like dealing with your teachers and staff. I think framing is an important part of what that could potentially look like. So like when you go into those conversations or when you are collaborating with staff related to accountability and support, I think it's important to focus on the problem and not the person. So like, for example, if you have a staff member or teacher that constantly does not turn things in, I'm not going to refer back to the 10 times that you didn't turn in something. I'm going to refer to this one specific time when you didn't turn it in. And I always like to frame things in a positive and not the negative, but also I always end those conversations with two questions. How can I hold you accountable, and how can I support you? And I think those two questions help to get the other person to self-reflect on what they can do better, but also hold me accountable to hold you accountable. You know what I mean? So I think though, it's just the framing. I think the framing is equally important.
I would say a couple things to add. I think one of the best pieces of leadership advices I got was to think about which balls are rubber and which balls are glass. And I think sometimes, like, as principals, everything can feel like glass when some of them are actually rubber, right? And for the ones that are rubber, I'm not going to put that pressure on my staff just yet. I'm going to make sure that I help them prioritize like what things are most essential at the time. And I think why is really important. So I know the way I am, like, I'm highly compliant, but I just want to know why, right? Like, I'm going to do it, but like, I really need you to tell me why I have to do it. And it's being honest. Like, sometimes I'm like, y'all, DCPS is making us do this. Like, please get it done by this date. It is okay. Like, we just got to get it done, right? Other times it's like, let's talk about like the deep investment behind like what this means for our kids and our community and why this is important. And I thought about, like Scott earlier was talking about the Insight survey. Like, we ended up having a 96% rate. With one teacher missing. But we give the results, right? Like, we had another survey we took, we talked about it in all, like there isn't a secret here. Like, this is what y'all said. Here's how we're gonna think about it as a community, whether it's good, bad, ugly, or wonderful. And I think when people are invested in the why and like they see the effects of the things that you're asking to do, because like that's a 20 or 30-minute survey, right? They could be doing something else, then it becomes something that they are more, inept to do because they see and understand the rationale behind what this task is being asked. So I think that is something that's important in addition to.
Posing questions, speed round. This is one of our favorite questions, but if you had a magic wand to change one thing in education, what would it be?
Innovation. I think we are at a place where like society is changing, but school may not be changing. We're sort of stuck in this time frame and era of tradition, but society is far more advanced, and I wish I could just wave that wand and catch us up to society.
Thinking about one thing I would want to add, and that would be more creativity, like as far as I want to have a band at my school. Like I played at Maury, I played at clarinet. That's how I learned how to play, and that's why I was interested in music. I would want that. I know that's one thing I would wait to add to have at the school. I would think that students should have the freedom to be as creative as they want to be, and I feel like it's very constricting. And I would love for that to be as valued just as reading and writing is.
I have two, but I'm gonna try to slide them together. I think just true community schools, right? I think a lot of times like we will say, oh, we're a community school, but like we really don't have the healthcare, the mental health care, like all the supports. So if I could wave that wand, like I would make sure that every school had that true feel. And my second one, and I'll slide in, money aside, like if every kid had a personal concierge, that would just be amazing, right? Like someone is like responsible for like making sure that like all their appointments are taken care of, like their mental health or like some sort of advisement, like they have homework help like built in. I just think a lot of our kids, even kids that, come from quote unquote good households, right? And that's a whole other panel, right? But, it's a situation where like parents just need help, kids need help. And I think a lot of times we just don't have that help readily accessible. So it would be awesome to just have that right there.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Can we do one more time? I was trying to and I think it's really about girls' humanity and like humanity of what your role is. And I think that's so important for being able to understand this bigger picture, because if you guys can't be human beings, then like the teachers in your school and the families and the students can't be human beings. So thank you for being so human with us. It means a lot.